have a confession to make. I have an affliction, a disease, if you will. It's a neurological disease. It's been often characterized as obsessive-compulsive data disorder. I am a data geek. I love data. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a physician. I don't claim to be a data scientist either. But I love the ability of leveraging information to educate the world and educate ourselves, and frankly, give ourselves the opportunity to unlock the potential that's in us all without necessarily having to read books to get there. In fact, sometimes after paying some of my friends, they say, "Milind, you're like a genius." I'm like, no, I'm no genius. I'm just a guy with a beard, you know. If I was genius, I would have figured out how to grow hair. But I'm not. I'm just a guy who loves information. But it occurred to me, well, why are they saying that? I mean, think about it. We've all said this, right? Oh, that was genius. And you have these genius moments. And we've all had it in our family, with our friends, with people we work with, etc. And I wondered to myself, just what the heck is genius? Right? I mean, to me, this guy was a genius. I hold him to the highest regard. I also hold people like Leonardo da Vinci as a genius. I hold many musical talented people as geniuses. I hold young kids as geniuses because I think their innocence by which they communicate is fabulous. Speaking of innocence, some people have even told me that my son, my youngest fellow, is a little bit like Einstein, and it's not because of the tongue licking my head. This was in the heat of summer in Australia at that time, and I can tell you, the reason why they said that is that my son does have a neurological challenge. He's a special needs child. And much like Albert Einstein, he didn't say his first word till he was 5. He has the diction today, he's 7 years old today, but he has the diction of an 18-month-old. To this day, we don't know what neurological issue is actually going on. All that we know is that he is special and deserves all the love and encouragement that we and his family can provide. But it made me think, though, right? So, you know, can I do something about it? I'm a data guy. You know, there's got to be something I can do in this space to help him. I work in clinical practice. My background's in genetics. I mean, surely there's something that we can do there. I want to take you to a story. This is a story that's real. I want to take you to what was that moment in time that got me thinking about this. And not only got me thinking about this, but got me off my ass to actually do something about it. So I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with this place. How many of you have been to Barcelona? Yes, wonderful. So another famous genius from that region is a person by the name of Gaudi. Right? We went to the Gaudi Museum. If those of you are familiar with this area here, it's a pretty crowded area. The Casa Mia is an absolute architectural marvel. And in fact, going inside is equally as remarkable inside that place. We had just seen that place. It was around June, July of a couple of years ago when my son was about 4 years old. And we had just gone to Starbucks. My parents were with me. My 2 other children were with me. We had gone to Starbucks, and something happened. I'm not going to tell you what that is yet. I'm going to fast forward, and I'm going to tell you what got me motivated and the tools that I use now to start figuring out, frankly, can I use data to code genius, to create it, right? And this humble aspiration came at age 42. Those of you who've read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy would know this answer quite well. Everything happens at 42. And if you haven't reached there yet, you have so much left to do. But for me, 42 was a really remarkable age. It was a couple of things. It was the year that I also discovered that after seeing some physicians, I had adult onset dyslexia. And those of you who've read my SMSs, my emails, I feel so bad for you, and I apologize for that, because spell check has no chance against me. I like to talk in emojis. That's how I convey emotions. That's how I convey my sentences. But that also made me struggle. It's yet another data point, right? It came to be crystallized what I stood for and what I was going to do. And how I live my life now is really based on 5 simple things. In fact, Today is my day 2 on the job, and I remember interviewing for the job, and they said, well, here's the job description. I said, clean that. This is what my job description should be. And I'll tell you, it's these 5 things. I call it the 5 C's. I teach my children this. I've taught numerous CEOs of Fortune 500 companies the same thing when I was working at the UN. That is, number 1, curiosity. Like Albert Einstein said, you have to be curious. Right? It's a challenge, Ask questions, be curious. Number 2, have the confidence and audacity to ask difficult things, to go forward with your beliefs. Number 3, challenge and also be willing to challenge. I think we are living in times where clearly they are challenging, but at the same time, it's appropriate that we listen to those challenges. We try to understand what those challenges are, because somewhere in there may be something we missed which was actually a viable opportunity. Number 4, being not only curious, but also being charitable. Right? For me, knowledge is only as good as those who get to leverage it beyond yourself. That's why I love TED, right? Ideas worth sharing. This is all about us conveying our knowledge to you. And so for me, these are the things that I live my life by. And that's my job description. That's what I do. That's how I get things done. And I thought if I applied that to my personal life, what more can be achieved? So I thought of another wise man, a person by the name of Yoda. And those of you who know me know I have another addiction, which is Star Wars. And I thought, well, if Yoda had to write an equation around this, what on earth would it be? And again, I'm not a math person, so please leave your mathematical comments in the section, and if you're willing to contribute to that, please do. I tried to make it simple. I thought learning, i.e. the facts, the things we're taught throughout our life, plus wisdom, the mistakes we learned over a period of time, over that period of time, i.e. lifelong learning, if we leverage that as sort of the main part of the equation, well, all of those are frankly impacted exponentially by the power of our emotions. I don't believe there is a single person in this world who says, I create decisions or I make decisions based on fact. That's the biggest load of BS you will ever hear. Nobody creates decisions on fact. They all create it on emotion. We all do every day. We just like to disguise it as fact as it fits us. And I thought, well, if I could figure that out, maybe there's a chance of creating genius. So I thought to myself, well, okay, if we could do that, are there problem statements that we need to start resolving across all of those? Because I need to put it in context, right? I mean, that looks great on a slide or something, but it's not necessarily indicative of how we would apply this into meaningful outcomes that benefit many of us. In fact, could benefit my child as well. And I thought long and hard about what is my son's future going to look like? What is the next 1 or 2 years going to look like? How is he going to make friends? How are we going to make friends of parents? And I can tell you I've had horrible experience where parents have walked away from us simply because our child was a special needs child. And that pissed me off. And I thought, I'm going to fix this if it's the last thing I do, so my son would never have to suffer in this world or be treated the same way just because someone was ignorant to understand those simple facts or use their emotions to make that decision. So, some facts between childhood to a young adult. We know that 31 million students are failing out of school every day. These are all US statistics. I figure I'll throw a little math in here today. We know that 32 million repeat a grade between kindergarten to year 12. The one that truly shocks me is that one student drops out of high school every 26 seconds. Not good, huh? Imagine if we could even decrease that by a little bit, where maybe it's every 5 seconds or every 10 seconds. Think of the Elon Musk that we'd be creating. Think of the Einsteins that have an opportunity in this world to do something truly valuable with their time. But it doesn't stop there. Adulthood is actually much more complex. And I want to pose an interesting thing to you here. I found, as I was doing this research, that the way in which we thought about education was completely wrong. That's an easy thing to say, right? But what I'm talking about here is that actually the two most fundamental human rights that we are entitled to is education and healthcare. Yet they seem to be the two most underserved. And as we grow older, our educational benefits are complicated by healthcare benefits. And so I started to think beyond industry. You could say I thought like a DJ, right? If I mix these two together, what would it look like, right? And so here are some of the stats. 90% of today's workforce are lacking digital skills. You know, my daughter asked me a question. She said, "Papa, what do you do at work?" And I said, "Well, I make PowerPoint." You know, sad. Think of all of those years, all of those things we've learned, and the best we can do is some stupid PowerPoint, right? We need to rethink education for older populations. You know, you ever heard that phrase, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? That's where it comes from. Because we're trying to teach them like kids. I mean, do you like someone talking down to you? No, I don't. I like people treating me as an adult, working with me as an adult, teaching me in an adult fashion. The one that worries me again, right? The big one. With all this digital technology stuff, the transition from education to healthcare again. Dementia will be the #1 cause of depression and death in the world. Pretty sobering, right? But we can get past that. We absolutely can get past that. For me, when I thought about my child, you know, maybe doing some profession of some sort, how could I ensure that he is getting dignity back in his life? It's not about how much he knows. It's not about what he applies to, but that he feels fulfillment in what he's doing. I've spoken to elderly people across the world as part of my healthcare work that I do, and one of the #1 thing they always ask is that could people just treat me like I'm a human being, right? That's all we're asking for. So these are the challenges, right? Pretty grand, but I'm not afraid of these grand things. I think these are all accomplishable. And being a data guy and a somewhat digital guy, I thought, well, how can we impact that? Well, I collaborate with a bunch of weirdos like myself. And I love those weirdos to death because, you know, I tell you, dinner at our place is just a treat because you really have some fantastic conversations. But in thinking through that, I thought of what are all the contextual elements that actually will allow us to help us understand emotion at the point of decision making. Not what they did, but what is the emotional state of that individual at the point of decision making, and thereby in tapping into that emotion, giving them the best opportunity to fuel that emotion into productive behavior or into productive application and learning. So first of all, the state of weather, right? I mean, today was sucked. You know, I was telling my daughter this morning, I'm like, God, it's like Seattle again, you know? It's been like this for a week. But that little bit of emotion made me change so many things in my morning habit. Think of it what it does to a child or to an adult who wants to learn a new asset, right? If there's high pollen counts and you're taking medicine to ensure the antihistamines are working in your system, guess what? That numbs you a little bit. You may not be at your peak educational performance when you do that. #2, computer vision. Now, this is the stuff that my inner nerd comes out on. Computer vision is the whole area of being able to look at different areas of the face to measure emotion. Now, the feds have been doing this extremely well over a period of time. Other companies are doing it really well. If you start looking at MIT and the McGovern Institute, they're doing fantastic work in this space. This is an area that I think is really going to change things, particularly when you're holding up a device in front of you like this. If you're special needs, however, it's irrelevant because you're like this, or if you're autistic, right? #1 signal. But there's computer vision that can help that too. It's called peripheral computing. You block out everything in the middle and you only focus on the areas on the edge, right? Inner geek. Right? Speech, Alexa, it's all in our homes now. Commerce is changing. The way in which we order, buy, purchase, ask questions. In fact, The most terrifying experience I had late last year was cooking my kids a meal and hearing them talking and some random stranger giving them answers on their homework, only to find that it was Alexa. Google's dead for them. They don't use it. Google, if you're listening, right? It's dead. The world's changing, right? Wearables, pulsometers, this kind of information. Look, we're seeing a lot of good work happening in this space, in AI and machine learning, these other buzzwords that are thrown around, cognitive computing, whatever the heck that's supposed to mean. These are all areas that are doing niche problems really well, but not looking at the context under which emotional applications are being developed. Right? So I propose to you actually the problem that I am on a personal mission on. It's not trying to solve the Internet of Things. I don't care how many machines are talking to one another. I care about what emotions they're indicating in the children, in the people that I care about. I care about, can we actually attract an emotive state and understand what that emotion is at the point of decision making using all of that data? There was a buzzword floating around a couple of years ago called big data. Well, guess what, people? We're in the world of freaking enormous data now. And I love that challenge of trying to solve that problem, because if we can solve that problem, we can solve the problem of numerous kids who don't have to fail through high school. Imagine you have two students. First student, rote learner, passes, full A's, no problems. And I don't have an issue with standardized testing. That's a political issue. It's got nothing to do with how you learn. You've got those issues there. But then you've got other students where if you ask them the question, they can tell you just like that. If you ask them to write it down, they fail. It's not that they didn't know the question, but why couldn't they just use a speech recognition system and let the computer type out their answer for them? Imagine if that child now, instead of getting a 60, now got an 80 or a 90. Their emotive state would be happier, their willingness to learn would be happier, their ability to unlock their potential would be significantly improved. That's the goal, guys. That's the goal. So I imagine a world, this is when he was in India, we'd gone on a little trip. And at a very early age, I'm sure you've seen it, maybe in diapers, maybe not, but looking at the iPad and doing his own investigation. I think the one thing I want to propose to you all, that learning and the use of AI and the use of understanding emotions is not limited to age. So the first thing I'm on a mission to do is stop these crappy Forbes 30 under 30, 20 under 20. How about we start getting 50 over 50? We all have the right to be brilliant, special, and productive. Doesn't make you any less a genius. You're all geniuses. We're all geniuses in our own moments. We all have those moments, right? What if we could just do more? Now, I'll tell you what happened that day. So I've zoomed out the camera a little bit here. And you see, we were first located at the Starbucks, right? My son only had 2 words in his diction at that age. He knew Papa, God, and he knew this, because he knew how to point to things if he wanted something. They were the only 2 words he knew at age 4. My wife was ordering us kindly enough some Starbucks coffees, and that particular Starbucks is massively packed all the time. I was waiting outside with my parents. They have arthritis, so they were sitting on the park bench outside, and we were just waiting. I went in to check in, see if my wife wanted some help. I walked out thinking, okay, that's cool. She doesn't need help. She was just getting everything under control. A minute later, I heard a loud scream. I couldn't figure out where that scream came from. I went inside the cafe, and my wife had fallen on the floor, and she was holding her head on the floor, saying, I can't find him. I don't know where he is. And I said, what do you mean? Who are you talking about? People were looking at us because they thought we were having an argument. American accent, Aussie accent, it's difficult to understand. But we hadn't, no one knew. We ran outside on the street. I asked my younger son and my daughter and my parents, have you seen They said, no, we thought he was with you. Then I started losing it. I can't tell you, if you ever lost your child, just for even 1 minute, how much that feels like. Imagine losing them for half an hour. Imagine losing them in a country you can't even speak the language. You don't know how to ask for help, except asking for help. Thankfully, there were people kind enough in Starbucks who also ran around. We literally ran these blocks that you see in this picture, asking everyone. In fact, where he was found was there, in the arms of two kind elderly people. Now, at first, I should give you a pretext to this. There was an old lady who saw us on the street, and she said, what happened, what happened? I said, look, we've lost my son, have you seen him? And the one thing you learn, by the way, if you have a special needs child, dress them in the brightest, loudest colors possible, because your subliminal thinking will always remember that, even if you just pass them by. And thankfully, she said, yes, he was wearing a bright green jacket. Yes, where is he? And she said, well, an old man is holding him. I was going to beat the crap out of this old guy, right? But when I went there and I saw him, I crumpled. My wife crumpled. I ran across those streets. Literally, I could have stopped cars. I didn't care how many cars were on that street. So we found him. Anyone care to guess what his first words were when he saw us? Yeah, okay, all right. That, to me, was genius. Thank you.